tight schedule for everyone today, and in our virtual world, I don't know about you all, but I literally, there's no more break between meetings. It's like, oh, you can hang up one meeting and just get right into the next. So that's my life. Anyway, I just wanted to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us today for this book publication workshop. This is something that the Drescher Center for the Humanities does every spring. I'm Denise Maringal. I'm the acting director for the Drescher Center for the Humanities. And this year we wanted to open up this opportunity a little bit. So I'm joined by my co-hosts and fellow organizers, Felipe Filomeno from the Center for Social Studies Scholarship and Lynn Casabon from the Center for Innovation, Research, and Creativity in the Arts. And our idea this time was to present different kinds of opportunities for scholarly publishing and different support systems for scholarly publishing. So we've put together a group of panelists, each of whom represent slightly different kinds of options. And we hope that you'll all approach this with curiosity and think about scholarly publishing really broadly as a result of this session. So thanks for joining us, and I'm gonna turn everything over to my colleague, Felipe.
Good morning, everyone. It is our pleasure to have here today with us a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 editors or writing consultants, literary agents who are here to give you the best advice they can for publishing books. We have here with us Hannah Brooks-Motl, who is Assistant Acquisitions Editor at Amherst College Press. Our own Mark Alice Durant, founder of St. Lucie Books. Elizabeth Garber, who is Senior Editor for Sociology and Anthropology at Palgrave Macmillan. Deirdre Mullane, who is the founder of Mullane Literary Associates, and Carol Sargent, who is the founding director of the Office of Scholarly Publications at Georgetown University. Each of these speakers will have about 8 minutes to talk to you. Later, we'll have the breakout sessions. So now I'll turn things over to Hannah.
Thanks so much, Felipe, and thank you, Denise, and all of my fellow presenters and everyone for being here. So I'm going to be dropping some links into the chat. I'm not going to share any presentation, but I'll start with a little bit about Amherst College Press. We are an open access press. We're fully funded by Amherst College and a department of the library. What this means is that we don't charge book processing charges, which is one way that presses have sort of decided to make OA financially possible. But because we're fully funded by the library, we have a budget and we pay for all our books right up front. There are different models for how open access is funded, and it's important if you're interested in that possibility that you sort of educate yourself or understand what press you're working with, how they fund open access, if they even have it. So we acquire in lists that reflect the strengths and interests of Amherst. We have a liberal arts ethos that informs our acquisitions program, which means we're really interested in interdisciplinary work that spurs dialogue between fields. We're also very interested in projects that model like different ways to think about this recursive relationship between teaching and research. So for an example, we have a project, a monograph pubbing in July called Race and Law in South Carolina. And this is a monograph that was in part sort of co-written and researched by undergraduates in a history seminar at Dickinson College, which is where the author teaches. Other books that I'm excited about, we published The Border of Lights Reader last year. This is a hybrid kind of anthology edited collection in 3 languages. We're especially excited at the press about the multilingual potential of open access because we can think about audiences as inclusive, beyond just North America. And another book is Denise's own Radical Roots. We're really excited about that press. It's an exceptional example of our digital publishing platform, Fulcrum, which I'll talk about now. So, we do digital publication. We also make print books available at cost. And we have a very similar process to any university press. So, we go through a proposal process with authors. All of our projects are peer reviewed. Everything has to go through the board approval. Everything is copy edited, typeset, and the print copies, sort of look like traditional university press books. So it really is like that dissemination that's very different. The sort of publishing platform that we use, Fulcrum. So Fulcrum is built and hosted by the University of Michigan, and it's an EPUB reader. So the final product is a book. It's an EPUB. It's not a website. It's not like Scalar or sort of other authoring or publishing platforms you might be familiar with. But what Fulcrum can do is embed audio, video, and images in the flow of the text so that a reader isn't linking out to these, but sort of actually reads them in the book itself. And I'm going to put the link to Denise's into the chat so you can take a look at that. So these sort of audio, video, images, these assets are archived within and sort of preserved within the book. So essentially it's a way of kind of making these elements durable and accessible long-term. Because Fulcrum is library built and library based, they're really thinking about how to apply library stewardship frameworks to digital scholarship. So, and these sort of resources, these media assets also exist as resources. They have their own kind of resources tab where they have DOIs, like they're scaffolded with metadata. You can add to the resources tab after your book has been published. So it's a way to think about sort of the book as both an object and kind of an environment or an assemblage. Because we're open access, we don't have a sales and marketing department. We don't track sales, but we do track usage, and altmetric and citation tracking is built into the Fulcrum platform. So I'll drop an example of what that looks like. So altmetrics, allow you to sort of see how, like, what the social media chatter about your project is. The book files are available on Fulcrum, but they also go through library channels. So they go to Muse and JSTOR and other discovery channels. Because we do have because Fulcrum is a platform in development, and so there is the possibility that more functionality is being added, and that people come to us with projects that Fulcrum might be able to do. It's like maybe not capable at this moment. I think with all digital projects, it's important to be in touch with editors early on. Most publishing and authoring platforms have limits. They have things they can do and things they can't do, and each is slightly different. So it's important to educate yourself, because the platform will in many ways impact like what you can do. And I'm going to put some of the different kind of publishing and authoring platforms out there into the chat. And these are have been built by university presses or the kind of scholarly community. And these are the ones that are like used for the most part. So Fulcrum, as I said, it's not an authoring platform, it's a publishing platform. So it's a place to sort of publish and archive the outcomes of DH research. It's not the place to host the tools of digital humanities research. And that's kind of the distinction I try to make with authors. So it's not the place that people are going to be able to like kind of make an interactive map. It's the place where you can present the interactive map you've made and give the context and sort of talk about the methodology and the outcomes of that research. We invite conversation very, very early on from scholars, even if it's not a project that's going to develop Fulcrum's functionality. If it is something that is going to require media or audio or a kind of some sort of enhancement, it's good to have a conversation early to check in and just sort of see what's possible, and also to make sure that you understand what's necessary to your project, right? I will say that Ask University Presses is a website that has a lot of good information about kind of the publishing process, and it has something, a page specifically about digital publishing as well that's really useful. And there are these sort of like 4 questions that they encourage you to ask when you're thinking about digital publication. How will the project be funded? What's the intended lifespan of the project? How will it be sustained or preserved for that lifespan? And will it be static or continually updated? And so even like if you ask yourself those questions, the answers to those will sort of help guide you toward the right publishing platform, the right authoring platform, kind of thinking about what the right home for your project is. So for a book proposal for these kinds of projects, what we're really looking for are proposals that demonstrate why any of these enhancements, audio, video, new functionality, are necessary to the argument. If you're imagining something that's different from a typical scholarly monograph, that has a couple images, some maps, this is a very durable and important artifact, but if you're imagining something different, the proposal should be very explicit about why these digital affordances are required and how they serve to make the argument. I think Denise, can confirm this. These kinds of publications require an enormous amount of effort and work on your part as an author, as well as on the part of everybody else who's involved. So really thinking about what's necessary to your argument and foregrounding that in your proposal is really important. I think also proposals that
at 9 minutes, and from now on I realize that there is a little rabbit here that I can use, I think. Okay. I'll just be using that.
Okay. I just have one more thing to say. Also proposals that make show some awareness of open access and why it matters for this specific project. So, this project speaks to audiences who've been historically underserved by scholarly publishing, or it has the potential to be taught or to influence those who teach. So some awareness of like why OA is a good fit. And I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah. So now we can go over to Mark.
Hey, I'm Mark. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can you see my slideshow so far? Can you see it? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So thanks for inviting me. I do teach at UMBC. I'm in the art history and museum studies area. I am an artist by trade, I guess, or by training, but I've moved into scholarship and curatorial over the course of my career. And St. Lucie Books, there's our mission statement, publishes elegant, idiosyncratic, accessible books that combine words and images to celebrate contemporary photographic artists and to explore the marginal, hidden, and parallel histories of photography. And so I'll just give a little history of that, of our press. So St. Lucie started as a website, as an online journal that I started in 2011 to kind of house essays that I had written for obscure journals, and also to produce new content, such as conversations with artists, writers, and curators, etc. And then, I don't know, what am I supposed to? I don't know what that means. I'm just getting these. Okay. What's happening? I don't know.
We're not seeing it, Mark.
Well, somebody just did something. I got this prompt to annotate or something, and
I'm seeing your slides as well. I don't
see a message or anything. So
no, there's no message or anything.
Well, something came up and I clicked it. Now I can't.
We're still seeing your slides. If you can just advance.
I think you might have clicked the annotate version on the screen, because I can see a cursor going around, a little one.
So what should I do now? Sorry. I don't know what to do.
Is it maybe can you see on the top right corner there a symbol for ask to annotate or not? Maybe it's there on the top right corner of your slide screen.
Another thing is just to not unshare and then reshare. Maybe it'll fix it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
How's that?
Yep, we can see it.
It won't let me forward.
In the lower right corner, do you see little arrow icons? Try those. Use those to forward the slides.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Anyway, so St. Lucie started, so I'll tell you the story in a second, but St. Lucie started in 2017. We've published these 8 titles, and I'll run through them very quickly in a second. And I wanted to give a shout out to my colleague, Gannett Abraham, who's a graphic design professor at the UMBC. And it's basically a two-person operation. I'm the sort of editor, and Gannett is the designer. And we have this close working relationship. We were friends before, and now we're even closer friends because we've worked on all these projects together. And it's been a blessing and a gift to work with Gannett. So the short version of the story is that, I was writing for various journals and magazines and as I said, hosting this website, St. Lucie. And I heard about this book or this proposal by Laura Larson, who was a professor at the time at University of Ohio. And she was shopping it around. I contacted her to see who was publishing her book because I was simultaneously shopping a book of my essays around. And my book was, which I'll talk about in a second, was a kind of hybrid of scholarship, autobiography, and sort of, storytelling. And I shopped it around to the various, the usual suspects, Aperture, Princeton, Duke, etc. And everybody was super nice to me, but said, well, we don't know what this is, right? It's not scholarship, it's not a memoir, it's not criticism, it's not photo history, it's kind of all the above. And I said, exactly. And that's what I was interested in. I contacted Laura Larson and said, who's publishing your book? And she said, she basically said that she had been getting the same responses that I had. So it occurred to me that maybe I should start a press. I mean, I had no experience in it. I had certainly written for many different publications over the years, but I'd never produced a book. But I had known many people in the art world, in the sort of photo art book world. And so I just sought advice and decided that we would go ahead. And so the first book St. Lucie published was Hidden Mother by Laura Larson, which is a kind of episodic meditation on motherhood and longing, and in the process of her adopting a child from Ethiopia. And she uses these hidden mother photographs as sort of visual anchors. These hidden mother photographs are from the 19th century, in which mothers were literally draped or their identity scraped off the emulsion because they were just trying to get a photograph of the squirming baby, and they just needed the mom to kind of just hold the baby still. And so, of course, I mean, very rich metaphorically speaking. And so Laura used those images as this visual anchor for her own study or her own writing about portraiture, motherhood, and it was informed by scholarship and theory, but theory and scholarship are not privileged, but more like the kind of underpinning or the kind of an important foundation for this sort of very personal kind of writing. And that's what I was interested in. And that's what my book was all about. So anyway, I won't talk too much about this, but mine is a collection of these essays about my sort of personal involvement in photography, from my childhood obsession with my parents' wedding album to my own making photographs to people I studied with, et cetera. And just the kind of life in photographs, looking at how, photographs are inextricably bound in our personal and collective lives. So that it went very well. I mean, both books were received very well. Distribution is kind of a challenge always, starting a press and getting it out into the world, but it's been a process and it's getting better. So just to go through a couple more books, this is the third book, which is a collection of long range or wide ranging interviews with contemporary photographers. And there you go. You can just go through that. And then this to me is like the most amazing sort of document of the Trump presidency is this project with Oliver Wasow called Friends, Enemies, and Strangers, in which he combines vernacular photographs that he finds on eBay, photographs that he makes of his family and friends, and then these kind of altered photographs of the Trump administration and his minions. And it's this sort of, amazing collection of faces with no, I think one can sort of get who's the friend, who's the enemy, and who's the stranger, but nevertheless, it's a sort of amazing kind of compendium. And there's a short story in there by Rabi Alameddine, the great Lebanese American writer. And then came Running, Falling, Flying, Floating, which is a compendium of photographs and text by 80 artists and writers, all dealing with the body in these various states of running, falling, flying, or floating. And there are canonical photographs by people like Harry Callahan and contemporary photographs by people like Mara Biava, Aaron Siskins, Chris Burden, Jimmy Desana, and writings from a variety of like both curators, critics, fiction writers, and poets, including Marvin Heiferman, and in this case, Jane Marshing. So Bree Souter's 11 Years came out last year, and it's the first book we did that's sort of closer to a monograph. It includes 2 essays by art historians Kim Beale and Susan Bright. And, you know, Bree Souter is an amazing image maker who seems to reinvent photography with each new project, which is why I was interested in her work. Again, I'm just giving you a quick overview of all the various books. So these are all Bree Souter's works. And then more recently, this is Dairy Character by Odette England, who's an Australian scholar and artist. And she grew up in a rural Australia on a dairy farm. And so she made this book of photographs that or images that photographs of her that she's made, photographs that she found from dairy catalogs, photographs from her childhood, and texts, these sort of anecdotal texts about growing up in this sort of gendered rural, you know, dairy farm in which girls were treated as sort of cattle in a way. And it's this really powerful book. I'm sorry, I don't have any of the text there, but this is what some of the imagery looks like. And this is our most recent book, City of Incurable Women by Laura Larson. This is the second book I've done with Laura Larson. And it is kind of inspired by these Charcot photographs that he made in the 19th century of hysterical women at this asylum in Paris. And Laura has created this sort of image text, layered image text response to those images, imagining the lives of these women, the internal lives of these women, making images that sort of echo the gestures of the famous photographs that Charcot made, illustrating his theories about hysteria.
Mark, we are at 10 minutes.
Okay, well, I'm basically done. That's St. Lucie. That's our logo is from a detail of that painting, which hangs at the National Gallery of Art, and I visit it often. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Really beautiful books. Yeah. And next we have Elizabeth representing here Palgrave Macmillan.
Hello, good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. My name is Elizabeth Garber, and I'm the senior commissioning editor at Palgrave Macmillan for Sociology and Anthropology. Palgrave Macmillan has been publishing books in the humanities and social sciences for over 175 years. We have a wonderful legacy of publishing some of the top minds in these fields across generations. We have dedicated editors for each discipline. So I sit on the social sciences team, which means that I have colleagues who commission specifically in geography, in criminology, in education, and more. In 2015, we merged with Springer and are now a part of Springer Nature. This has been really great for our authors and for our books, as we now have a large global platform, and our ebooks are available on Springer Link. And so over 1 billion chapters and articles are downloaded from Springer Link every year. So if you're interested in, producing a book that a lot of scholars worldwide can read, we're a really good choice for you. And if I've got time later in my presentation, I'll sort of take you through Springer Link and show you sort of what the book looks like on our digital platform. But we, of course, also have our books all remain available in print as well. We primarily publish for the research audience. So this means that every year I publish monographs, edited volumes, handbooks, and major reference works. In 2012, we launched Palgrave.
Elizabeth,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Mark, can you please stop sharing your screen?
Oh,
because it's
I'm
still
sorry.
showing out.
I don't.
It should be, should there be like a stop at the.
It should be in the top center of the screen, like a little drop-down box that allows you to stop sharing.
I don't have it. I don't see it.
Just move the mouse.
Center
Move
of
the
the
mouse
WebEx
up.
meeting screen.
Okay.
Hold on, I
The
can.
host should be
Okay.
able
Got
to.
it.
There we go.
Oh, sorry.
Hello again.
Okay, back to Elizabeth.
Yeah. So I was going to talk about another one of our sort of types of books that we publish, and that's the Palgrave Pivot. We were the first publisher to launch these short form monographs. So these are 25,000 to 50,000 words, and we allow really short production timeframes for these books. They typically publish in 3 months, so it's good if you've got, a book that's longer than an article, but shorter than a traditional monograph, and you want it to publish really quickly in order to engage with a really hot topic or current debate taking place right now. We also publish textbooks, though these are largely for the upper undergraduate and graduate market. So not like your large, like intro to sociology textbooks, but something for a little bit more niche of a course. And we do also publish a small number of trade crossover books every year. And finally, we have robust open access options. We do charge book processing fees for this, but we can help you sort of hook up with different funders, both at your institution or nonprofits, things like these that might help with paying the book processing charge. So when it comes to the time frame and sort of how to get your book proposed, I'm happy to speak with authors at whatever stage if they have questions, but I find that the most fruitful discussions happen when authors have enough of a vision of their book to submit a proposal. Our proposal forms ask for a summary of the book, chapter abstracts that sort of detail what literature you're engaging with, any competing and related titles, as well as the traditional specs for the book itself, like estimated length, manuscript submission date, number of images, things of that nature. So when I'm looking for a successful book proposal, the number one element that I see is a really good hook on why this book is needed. So questions you might want to ask yourself are, how is your book taking the scholarship forward? Why would fellow scholars want to read it? What debates are you engaging with? Another really key element for a successful book proposal, particularly if we're working at just the proposal stage and a draft manuscript isn't available, would be a good set of abstracts for each chapter that really detail the flow of the book. Important here is not only a summary of what the chapter will be covering, but also what existing scholarship you'll be engaging with, because we send our proposals out for peer review. And often peer reviewers want to suggest additional literature for you to consider. And I think the most common feedback we get when negative peer reviews happen was that there's just not enough sort of detail of the book and what literature that the author would be engaging with. So the proposal process typically takes 6 to 8 weeks from when I receive a proposal. I try to give authors feedback within a week of receipt, and then the peer review stage happens. Typically the book spends about a month with peer reviewers, and then once we receive their comments, I look through it, I add any additional suggestions of my own, and ask for the author's response to the peer reviews and how they're going to integrate any of the feedback into the final manuscript. My goal is to either offer a contract or decline a book within 2 months. So we're pretty speedy compared to other publishers, because we know that authors want to know if we're moving forward with their book and, and to have a contract in hand. We don't require a complete manuscript for this initial stage of peer review. The sample material or an actual draft of the manuscript is always welcome. But editors at Palgrave Macmillan, if we only received a proposal at the initial stage, we will then send out the entire manuscript for a clearance read once that's in-house as well. So sometimes you can have 2 stages of peer review, one for the proposal and one for the final manuscript. So other questions that we'd had here were how long you know, how long would we give you if we just received a proposal? How long should you take to write the book? And if we're talking about sort of a single authored or maybe just a couple authors on a fairly straightforward monograph, I would like to have the final manuscript within 12 to 18 months of contract, maybe 2 years. And the reason for this is that I've found that, you know, if we set a contract, if we say that the manuscript's coming in 5 years, at that point, you may have already moved on to other research questions, or the scholarship and the scholarly debate would have changed so substantially that your proposal and your final manuscript don't really match. And then that's when we see like significant delays in manuscript submissions. So I think it's best to approach a publisher for this sort of, you know, for an authored monograph when you think you'll be able to write it within about a year or a year and a half. For large, complicated handbooks or textbooks, though, I'm happy to give additional time because we understand, you know, getting contributors lined up and getting those chapter drafts in-house can take additional time. The other really important thing to consider, or something that can hold up the process, would be third-party rights. So if you're intending to have a lot of images or text that has been previously published, it's really good to speak with your author early on, or excuse me, with your editor early on in the process about what you need to get cleared and how you go about clearing permissions. Felipe, am I okay on time to share an example of Springer Link?
Yes, you are at 7 minutes.
Okay, great. I'll just share my screen. Let's see, can you see this? Can you see Springer Link?
No,
or am I just
we're just showing your screen right now, which is us.
Okay, I'm gonna try sharing again.
Yeah, you should be able to share just the browser that
There we go.
Yeah.
I think I figured it out. Can you see this now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Felipe, you might recognize this book, Theories of Local Immigration Policy. And so this is our Springer Link platform where you get the kind of key selling points here on top, and then you're able to download both the individual chapters here, as well as the entire book. And the great thing about this is that you can track and see how many citations you have. So Felipe, congratulations, because 39 citations is quite a lot. And then you can go in and see exactly where the book was cited. We also have access to Altmetric that Hannah was speaking about earlier. So you can see where your book's been mentioned either in the news or on Twitter. And you can see how many times chapters have been downloaded as well. So even though we have, here we go, I think I've stopped sharing now. So even though we have, you know, traditional print books, these sort of, you know, using technology to see what chapters are being downloaded the most, who's reading it, who's citing it, is a great tool that we're able to provide authors. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Now we have our literary agent, Deirdre. I think you're muted. Deirdre, we still cannot hear you.
I'm going to unmute her.
Mute me. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So I was saying I've got no screens, no links, whatever. So very low tech. As are most of the publishers that I work with. I'm listening to kind of all of the new technologies and different ways that you access the things you publish, and it's quite different. I was an editor for a long time. I've been an author, a publicist. I was inside publishing for a long time. I've been an agent now for about 15 years. Most of my clients are academics, or a good 75 to 80% of them, I would say, are academics. And we're looking to do what the trade calls serious nonfiction, which sounds very generic, but it's actually a thing, which is what it sounds like, which is serious nonfiction. But there are not that many trade publishers who do this. It's kind of a continuum. We work with academic presses, with Harvard, with Oxford, with Yale, with Chicago, with California, with Duke, with others, and then into places like New Press, Beacon, and then finally Basic, Norton, some of the random imprints. It's a pretty narrow band of publishers who do serious nonfiction. And when I'm working with a client, sometimes they will think, well, I'll do the more academic book with Oxford, and then I'll do the trade book with somebody else. And there really is no daylight between those two books. It's a continuum. And it's a kind of a narrow range of publishers who do it, but those who do it quite well. And there's obviously a market for it, and nonfiction is just doing very well right now. Serious times, people want serious books. I don't handle any memoir and very, very little fiction, mostly history, science, some environment, politics, some sociology, narrative, uh, that sort of thing. And a lot of authors, academic authors, who've done a couple of academic books, and they want to speak to a larger audience. They want to do that trade book. And the question is, what is a trade book? And it's not simply the book that you're already writing, but with a bigger publisher, a larger advance, and more readers. There are very specific uh, ways of shaping the book, narrative strategies involved in the book, the presentation of the book, that make it a more trade or more public facing kind of book. Um, Subject is kind of sometimes part of it, but that's so serendipitous. I mean, some topics are going to be inherently too narrow in a large trade audience too. But other times the world kind of catches up with us. I work, as I said, with a lot of historians. I've got a historian, Scott Nelson. We've done several books together. He does a lot with labor and economics and capital. And he had his 25th wedding anniversary, and his kids made a cake, and it said 25 years and still talking about wheat. And it turns out that the book that he has just published is called Oceans of Grain, and it's with Basic Books. And it's essentially the kind of short pitch is how the American Civil War made the Russian Revolution possible, but it involves wheat, and it involves the Ukraine. Well, when we sold this book 2 years ago, who knew? The book is just out. He's been just everywhere, BBC and NPR and Financial Times, and everywhere, talking about this problem and the long history of this problem in Ukraine. And that happens all the time with serious books. This is many years ago, but I was actually a publishing director at Routledge years ago, and uh, all of a sudden we're all hearing about the Taliban. What's the Taliban? The only publisher who had a book on the Taliban was Yale University Press, and it became a bestseller. So the topic is, sometimes it seems sort of obvious, and sometimes it's something that there's a certain topicality and it just catches. And you can't, my advice to the author is, write the book that you're writing, write the book that you want to write, and we see what happens in the marketplace. The goal is to just make it as accessible to the broadest readership that you can. If you are going to work with a trade house, you must have an agent. They just won't look at anything unagented. And it's been interesting to hear some of the other panelists talk so much about proposal. And I'm actually not going to talk about proposal. We can talk about that, or people can have questions about that later. It's a very long conversation it's a 3-hour workshop, but that more of you are doing things on the basis of proposal as opposed to full manuscript, because my experience had been that more academics came to me with a whole manuscript, and that's more difficult to place because, again, there are the trade is looking for a certain sort of a shape of a manuscript, and as much as an author's like, oh, I'll be happy to revise, you've got your 350 pages, it's harder to kind of be persuasive. But I did it recently. I had a project, the author had the manuscript, it was practically ready to go. I said, we really need to do some things, and then we ended up having 6 publishers bidding on the book, and it went to Oxford. So it can require some tweaking, but I do get involved very early in the proposal stage, and there are all just kind of narrative strategies and kind of rules about what it is that the trade reader, and before the trade reader, the trade editor is looking for. And I mean, one of them, very often in an academic monograph, you present your argument right up front, and then everything flows from that. Whereas in the trade book, it's kind of the reverse. You lay out a kind of a scenario which demonstrates certain facts or conflicts or whatever, and then you draw your conclusions as you get further into the book. So it's a kind of a narrative difference. One of the things that, again, this sense of what is a trade book, in the proposal, we always include the comparable titles, what other books are out there, as we say, out there, that readers would know or editors would know, that represent, either competition for your book or that are for the same audience for your book. And one of the things I constantly press authors on is, you can't just list 5 New York Times bestsellers and say that your book is like those books, because that's just not practical. It's not the case, and most books are not bestsellers. So it really is a process of really digging into what are truly comparable to your book and that would appeal to your audience. And it's best if you've read some of them to really get a sense of what that author is doing and how they're conveying their material or telling their story. I'm constantly reading myself, both because I just love reading books, but to just see how authors are working with narrative. And it changes too. There are kind of styles of narrative that become more popular. For example, in biography, we rarely see, the kind of cradle to grave biography. It's more kind of a pivotal moment that we focus on. So it really is a lot more attention to the narrative than simply the research, although the research is incredibly important. And it, the author should not think that that you're writing down to your trade audience. Sometimes, like, I'll get a query and someone will say, in easy to understand prose. I'm like, nobody wants easy to understand prose. They want engaging prose. So it really is that balance between all that research that you've done, but presenting it in a way that is engaging to people who aren't talking about these issues every day with other scholars. I think the only other thing that I'm really gonna talk about is that for a trade publisher as well, it's the subject of the book. They must see that there's some broad enough audience for it. Obviously, it has to suit their list. That the author, has suggested a way of of bringing this story or this research to that audience. But the other thing that trade publishers talk about all the time is platform. And it's not the same as credentials.
You agree?
Yeah,
We are at 10 minutes, okay? So if you can wrap up.
sure. Okay,
Thank
I'm
you.
looking for the rabbit. This is the last thing. It's the platform, which is not your expertise, which the trade publisher will pretty much take as a given. They do not send the review out, the proposal or the manuscript out for review. You come to them with your credentials. They have confidence in that. It is, do you engage with a popular audience through op-eds, blog posts, social media, with a broad audience on your topic? And that's for them a critical component.
Thank you.
Okay.
And last but not least, we have Carol Sargent, who is a writing consultant and has worked with UMBC faculty in the past, helping them get books and articles published. Carol.
Hi, and yes, I've worked with your wonderful faculty on a number of occasions, come there and give talks. I've come there to give talks, and I would be eager to do it again. One of the interesting things about UMBC is I chose you because you were such a rising star and really now established star campus now that you're in the R1. Congratulations for that. Scholarly publishing actually doesn't contribute that much to the R1 status, though, oddly enough. It's the fruit of what contributes to the R1 status, and that's the grants. But it is the significant fruit of the grants, and the grantors want to see those first tier publications coming out of all that wonderful money they gave you. And so I work with scholars, and I really work with them to get them through a pretty tight bottleneck that I say, and it's not because I'm snobby, it's because a lot of these committees are. I say, if it was up to me, I'd be able to publish in a lot of places. But I help academic authors get traditional book deals at the big old dinosaur presses, you know, the Cambridge, Oxford, Princeton. People are like, oh my God, haven't we moved on from this yet? Well, I wish, and I actually work with editors at a whole lot of publishers, but there's some committees who are still Ivy League obsessed. And then what I do is I try to get professors on the inside when they're past tenure and when they're past full professor to start pushing back against that system. I say, let's get within it and then change it. I also help them get into the highest and hardest to crack journals. And weirdly enough, and this is a fun thing that I love to say to my groups, it's easier to go higher. It's easier to go higher. Write it down. First of all, a lot of people are opting themselves out. They're just saying, oh, I might as well not bother. And so a lot of people are getting out of your way even before you try. But it makes the editors so sad. And in fact, one of them said it was really upsetting to him when he saw new voices going into significantly lower ranked journals because they thought they had to be there. When he said, I know what I'm looking at. I'm happy to break new voices in my top ranked journal, right? And he was almost jumping up and down, and he was a very jovial man. He was a very happy man. And they said, what you often meet is you're expecting to meet a snob in a tie. And what you often meet is a very kind person who's actually a book nerd like you and me, and who really loves this work. If you look at the videos, if you want some fun, go on YouTube and look at the videos for the Nature Master classes. Even though it's behind a paywall, you guys may actually have the Nature Master classes, so go ahead and watch them. I did one of their certificates, and it was well worth it. But they're the nicest people. One of the editors had full sleeve tats, you know, another one was sitting there, and she was very prim and everything, but she was talking in her English accent about how to write a long abstract, and she goes, the abstract is the door to your summary for Nature, you know. And they couldn't have been more different, these two people. And I said, wow. And people think there's one way to approach an editor? You've got to be kidding. So we do a lot of things like pre-submission inquiries. I teach people how to knock on doors, how to go to conferences and meet all the editors at the conference, even the ones you don't think are your target. I begged one guy to meet an editor at a press that for whatever reason he didn't think was right for him. And I said, just go talk to her. She loves your work. She asked me about you. She knows your stuff. And he had an attitude, and boy, did it come back to bite him, because then she ended up at his dream press. She got a job at his dream press, and it was significantly harder to talk to him because she was swamped with a whole bunch of other people who were trying to get deals with her. So I said, talk to them when their careers are growing, meet them at conferences. If some editor is just starting out, take them out for coffee and get to know them. We do, I'm just going to give you some of the tips that Felipe asked me to bring up. He said, tell us how you work with writers. My preferred method is groups. And, at first I thought, oh my God, all these, smart, accomplished people aren't going to sit in a circle. Well, they love it. They love it. It's like, what I said is the difference between me and your therapist is that your therapist wants you to get better. I don't care if you get better. I just want you to publish, right? But they still come with their problems and their concerns. We have accountability. We have collegiality. We normalize the weird feelings around publishing, and boy, can it make you feel weird. I actually thought I had some sort of disorder on my second book, and then I found out everybody has it when they publish books. I now, 17 years into this job, I've been at Georgetown 25. I now know how many people are suffering with the same problems I thought were my own secret tragedy. What specific benefit can I add to the publishing process? Strategy, speed, and I'll get you writing half the work for 5 times the impact, right? Really, I'm going to put you on a word diet like you would not believe. And it's not just going to be for the manuscripts you write, although yes, that is a significant and important part of what we write that's shorter, but I'm going to get you to write shorter letters to the editors, no more of these 5-page, let me tell you my whole life story, right? We try to get you in conversation with each other. Let's even find out if they think you're interesting before we start telling them all these things. We tried, and I just a quick funny story, and I know I have 3 minutes because I'm watching this. I may have a minute after that, but I took an author with me to meet a Yale University press editor at a breakfast. And I said, now do me a favor. I said, I know you came into my office with a massive manuscript, but let's just talk to the guy, okay? Let's just be friends. I know him, he's sweet. Let's just have coffee. We can get to the manuscript stage later. And he said, okay. And he comes to the breakfast, and before we even have the words out, he's pushing this giant printed out manuscript across the table at the guy, who literally is going backwards like this. Thinking, oh my God. The guy did eventually publish with a different press. He published with Stanford after I finished screaming at him in the parking lot, don't do that to me again, right? So we stop inundating with them with words, and we start getting to know who they actually are, and they want to tell us their story. They want to tell us all about them. What are 2 or 3 writing tips I can share today? The first one is pitch it first and then write it. Deirdre kind of mentioned this with the trade world, but frankly, I do it with everything. We do it with academic writing. We even do it with academic articles. And somebody said, I had one of our economists over in the business school who just made full professor here. He said, Carol, we don't do that in my field. Oh my God, it's very formal. You have to write the whole paper, and then you submit it to the journal, and you can't say anything. And I said, are you nuts? I said, what do you think the editorial board is? FedEx, Kinko's? They just print your stuff? I said, this is a conversation. They want to talk to you. And he says, he didn't believe me, right? So I said, why don't you do me a favor? Find an editor, any editor who you know. You got to know somebody. He knew a guy from grad school. I said, ask him. He said, well, he's at a really big journal, but okay. So he writes to this guy. And the guy says, what have you got? Do you have an idea in mind? So he said, well, we were working on this research. And the guy writes back and he says, here's 3 to 4 papers to look at. Why don't you look these over and tell me if they look interesting to you? And maybe we can think together about how to talk to our board. Who knows? We could have a special issue. The author comes back to me and he says, what just happened? And I said, what just happened is scholarly communication. What a shock. What a shock. These editors want to talk to you before you go, but they don't just want to sit around and teach you how to publish, right? They got better things to do than that. And that's why I exist. I do want to sit around and tell you how to publish. The secret is, though, I don't actually know all fields, and I don't actually know all editors, and I don't actually know all of you. So what I say is, I'm not such a big shot. We learn how to maneuver it together. We learn how to gradually, through the query process and through this really gentle process of getting to know editors, We read catalogs. Oh, the university catalogs. If you learn to read these catalogs, it's a royal road to their heart. Those books are their babies. They absolutely love them. I want to invite somebody in. I have 12 seconds on my clock, and I want someone to come wave to you. James, can you come in for a second? This is my colleague, James Benton. And he won the Gutman Prize for his dissertation in history at Georgetown. And now he's going to be published with the University of Illinois Press. And we talk about his book all the time. But James was a journalist before. Did anything that I just say sound like BS to you, James?
No.
Thank you. Okay. James says I know what I'm talking about. And since he has a prize-winning book coming out.
There you go.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm done.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you to all our speakers. So we're going to move to the breakout sessions. So folks here can, have more direct conversations with the speakers that might, speak more to your publication interests. So I think, is it Courtney that is going to do the mechanics of that for us?
Yes, I'm doing it right now. And the way it should work is that you should be able to go to any one. You don't have to, you're not going to be assigned.
Courtney,
Yes?
I don't have my video on. Can you tell people how they would go between? So if they want to move from one breakout to the other?
That part I have not figured out yet, but I will be around to help. Because when I did the testing, it was just me by myself, so I couldn't, figure that out. But we will work on it together. Almost done.
Yeah, Morgan is saying in the chat, and I think she's correct, that you kind of would bounce out and you'd come back to this main landing area, and then you could select another room if you wanted to. But we'll try it out.
Okay, I think, can everyone see the breakout session window? No?
No.
So there should be
I don't see what I
menu bar at the top, and there's like an arrow where you can have a drop down menu, and then there's breakout sessions as an option.
Oh, yes. So at the very top menu bar, you should have breakout sessions as an option, and if you hover over that,
Got it.
one of the options should be join breakout session, and then you can see the different sessions. Or I can share my screen and show you what I'm talking about.
Will you need to put the link to the main page back in there too?
Share the screen.
For that, they will just leave breakout session. I could also send out a broadcast message. So if they want to leave the breakout session, it'll automatically bring them back to here. So if you're in charge of a breakout session, I'm gonna put the relative everyone into their session who needs to be there.
Thank you.
Oops. Okay, I am moving people.
I just tested it out, by the way, and if you're in a breakout session, you can literally just select a different breakout session using that same menu bar. So that's how it seems to work.
Okay, I am moving folks over. Okay. Okay, and then Carol, I'm moving you over to yours.
Yeah.
Okay.